Left, Tom Caron from NESN with you. Alex Spear has this episode off. He's working on end of season things and will be back with us next week. Who won't be back with us next week in a professional sense is Joe Castiglione. And he wouldn't anyway, right? The season ends on Sunday. We wouldn't hear Joe next week. But we would be thinking about hearing him next year at spring training. And as we now know, that is not going to be the case. The legendary voice of the Red Sox on radio for 42 years announced in New York earlier this month that he would be retiring at the end of this season. That means this Sunday's game at 3 o'clock against the Tampa Bay Rays will be the last game with Joe Castiglione as the full-time voice of the Red Sox. Now, he has told us that he's going to stay on in a capacity as an ambassador for the team, and he couldn't ask for a better ambassador. Anybody who has gotten to know Joe will tell you that there is no one who loves this team or this sport more than Castiglione himself. It's been quite a year for Joe. He was honored with the Ford C. Frick Award by the Baseball Hall of Fame earlier. That was in July, and that award given out each year for excellence in broadcasting. It's essentially, though they are not truly Hall of Famers because they weren't players, but they are essentially the broadcast version of the Hall of Fame. And it was just fitting that Joe would receive that honor while he was still doing games. I had to miss games to get out there to Cooperstown, and it wasn't easy. Joe does not like to miss games. I've gotten the opportunity and have had the honor to do dozens of games with Joe over the years in spring training and filling in on regular season games with him. Just an incredible baseball mind, truly an encyclopedic knowledge of the Red Sox and the game. Players called up, he would have copious notes on, and you weren't even sure who they were. And he'd be telling you about their history and about how they got to the Red Sox and so on. Just a guy who loves what he does and does it better than just about anybody who's walked the face of the earth. So this edition is a special one, a tribute to Joe Castiglione. Want to listen back to a conversation Alex Spear and I had with him back in July, just before he drove to Cooperstown and received that Ford C. Frick Award. So let's hear from Joe Castiglione on the eve of his final games in the Red Sox booth. Joe Castiglione is the subject of this 310 to Left podcast.
I have to imagine you have seen more Red Sox baseball than anyone else ever, right? By virtue of the number of games you've seen, both home and road over the course of this remarkable run of now this is season 42, right? But right. At what point did you feel like you were settled in Boston? Like, obviously you had roots in Boston. When did you feel like you were actually settled in as into this job?
That's it's difficult to pinpoint a year, but I think after we changed rights holders for the 1990 season, and I was in with American Radio at the time, Atlantic Ventures actually, which became American Radio, that gave me more solid footing. And it probably wasn't until the early 2000s when I came to the realization that I was established and I wouldn't ever have to worry about going out and trying to sell insurance or stocks and bonds, something I never wanted to do. So that was, I think, when I realized maybe 20 years ago that, hey, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do anymore. And I still love doing it. So, and I did teach, of course, in the off season at Northeastern and Franklin Pierce. And I did that to give back and also for income.
All right, 2004 really begins, obviously, in many ways in 2003, right? So you go from calling Aaron Boone's home run and the end of that Game 7 in New York to a year later calling a World Series championship. Take us through that roller coaster, those couple of years, and what was it like for you? As Alex just said, no one has spent more time at Fenway. No one has invested more of their life in the on-field ups and downs of the Boston Red Sox. What was that moment like for you to, after 86 years, be a part of a world championship team?
Well, it was certainly startling and in so many ways amazing. I mean, in '03 we had a powerful team. I think still the best slugging team the Red Sox have had, comparing it anyway to 1977 when they hit all those home runs. But we had an awesome team. And of course, the game, they had a 5-2 lead going to the eighth inning. With Pedro pitching when Grady sent him back out there. And then, of course, the game goes extra innings. And I always tell Aaron Boone I tried to push it foul, and I knew it was gone. It was over, and I felt so bad for Tim Wakefield. I saw him in the airport that night, and I always regretted I never consoled him. I was just didn't know what to say, and he thought he would be uh, victimized by it, but it was Grady Little who got the heat for sending Pedro back out there. But it was another tragic moment for the Red Sox, and we'd had that in '86, so I had a little experience with that. And in '04, of course, they got Schilling, and Pedro was still in his prime. And it was a team built to win because they had great starting pitchers. I think a starter only missed maybe one start all season. They stayed healthy, and they were outstanding and dominant. Although the Yankees won the division, the Red Sox were the wild card. But we go to play the Angels in the ALDS, and Poppy clinches the series with a walk-off home run, a sweep, and then of course the Yankee series down 3 games to none, as we all know. My only thought was at the time, hey, the Red Sox are better than this. They shouldn't be swept in a 4-game series. And the Yankees have some holes. They're not that good, especially their pitching. So, the Dave Roberts steal, of course, I had that call, and which was still one of the highlights of my Red Sox career, calling that steal. But it would have meant very little, just a footnote, had it not been for Bill Miller, who had a walk-off home run July 24th against Mariano Rivera, driving a shot up the middle against Rivera to drive in the tying run. And of course, we go to extra innings. But it was exhilarating. And after the first win, I thought it was nice. And then, of course, game five goes 14 innings. David Ortiz wins that with a blue pit. And you started to believe at that point as we flew back to New York. I remember that game started at 5. I think it went 5 and 3/4 hours, something like that. We got to the hotel in New York for game 6, maybe at 3 or 4 in the morning. And there was no off day because we had a rain out earlier, which probably helped the Red Sox. They win game 6 thanks to 2 overturned calls by Joe West before a replay when, first of all, Mark Bell landed a ball to left field. We thought it was a 3-run homer. The umpire didn't see it right. He thought the fan reached over, called it a double, but Joe West overruled the crew chief, and it clearly hit the fan in the chest over the fence. So the Red Sox win that game. After the dramatics, we thought it was another tragic moment when A-Rod knocked the ball out of Bronson Arroyo's hand, rolling down the first base line. But again, there was Joe West to overrule Randy Marsh and call it interference. So when you went to Game 7, I think the hopes were really rising. He won 3 in a row, but still no team had ever done it. And then Poppy hits a home run in the first inning, Johnny Damon the grand slam in the second inning, and you had a feeling it was finally going to happen. So, unfortunately, it was a blowout. So we didn't have those feelings. Although there was a few anxious moments there when Pedro came on, the "Who's Your Daddy" thing was going through Yankee Stadium, was very loud. But Johnny hit another home run to cinch it.
So obviously, it then ends up going to St. Louis to, the World Series, St. Louis. Can you believe it? And I wonder that became kind of immortalized, right? Like there are beer like bottle openers that you would flick off the bottle cap and it would say, "Can you believe it?" I'm curious first if you have what kind of mementos like that, what kind of merchandise you have that is associated with that call, and secondly, like the extent to which you kind of workshopped that in that moment in your mind. Like, was there is there an alternate call that exists somewhere on a cutting room floor that none of us ever heard?
All kinds of thoughts were going through my head, Alex. How am I going to describe this? Try to be clever. And then I came to the realization you can't script it. I mean, the Red Sox they won the first 3 games. 11-9. I think the first game when Bellhorn hit the ball off the foul pole and uh, win game two at Fenway. Then game three, Pedro with 7 scoreless innings, in large part with Manny throwing out a runner at the plate in the first inning. And then, of course, game four, Damon leads off with a home run. And I'm thinking all the time, how am I going to describe it if it does happen? And I had all these thoughts. And then I came to the realization you can't script it. You don't know how it's going to end. And I was just hoping it would be something definitive, not a check swing. Did he swing or didn't he? Not a diving catch. Did he catch it or didn't he? Just a routine ground ball to the pitcher was perfect because it was very simple. It was going to happen. And, can you believe it? It sort of become a phrase I used after that Bill Miller home run we mentioned in July off of Rivera. And I thought it was appropriate because the Red Sox had just completed the greatest comeback of all time. No club had ever come from 3 games to none to win a series in baseball. I think it had only happened in hockey. And so I thought, can you believe it was appropriate? And it just came out. So, and the bottle cap opener took off, uh, paid for a year's tuition. And it was more popular because in '07, they did a pizza cutter. And that got a little obnoxious because it kept going back and forth, and you kept hearing me with the last out when Papelbon struck out Seth Smith. So the bottle cap opener was much more appropriate because you didn't have the repetitiveness. You only opened the bottle once, and there it was. But I have those mementos, of course, and it was just a surreal feeling in that ninth inning. I remember and I've never been an athlete to know what it's like to be in the zone, but if a broadcaster had ever been in the zone, it was the top of the ninth inning with a 3-0 lead in St. Louis in Game 7. And, I was just concentrating and hoping that it would be definitive and that we could give it a final call and then let the crowd, well, we're on the road, so the crowd didn't play as it would certainly at home, but then uh, quickly get down to the clubhouse where Jerry Trupiano was stationed, finish my portion and get down there as well because I wanted to get soaked with the champagne too.
You mentioned the definitive, the hope for the definitive call at the end as the final play. I wonder what the most difficult final play is that you have called. Like I think about 2018 game 4 in the ALCS when Andrew Benintendi made the diving play, and that one you memorably took a spill while calling it and continued to call it. What's
Why
been
you got to
my
bring that up? He's going in the Hall of Fame, Alex. Why do we got to bring that up?
He's a
That's in the
warrior. Like this
speech.
was incredible.
That's actually in the speech. I credit Tim Never for picking me up off the floor. And it was such a tense game. And Kimber was the pitcher. He'd been struggling a little bit. And Alex Bregman with 2 on, lines one to left center. If Benintendi didn't catch it, it probably would have gone through to the wall and tying and winning runs would have scored because it was a 1-run lead. And he made the diving catch. And as he did, I went to stand up. The chair had wheels on it. As I went to roll back, the chair went one way and I went the other. And I ended up flat on my back with a headset microphone, which moved a little bit, but I could still be audible. Wasn't that far from my mouth, so I rolled over. I said, and I just went head over heels. I told the world about it. Later, I said to my, why did Tim Neverett have to tell the world I did it? Well, I was the one who announced that I had flipped over, and that was certainly a memorable moment. And the next day, I remember the 3 outfielders, Jackie, who's such a dear friend, and Mookie and Benny were laughing about it and really teasing me and enjoying it. So that really turned that series in the Red Sox favor because had they lost that game, who knows what would have happened. I think that put them up
No
3-1.
doubt. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. The when I don't know, you may know this story. Gary Thorne, who of course was the voice of the NHL on ESPN for so many years. The story goes when he was calling college hockey as a student at the University of Maine, they had to take the wheels off the chairs in the press box because every goal he would roll across the press box or flip himself upside down. So, I mean, but it speaks to the passion, right? I think for any
Yeah.
of us fans, hearing you and you could sort if you know because everybody was replaying the broadcast the next day, right? You could hear the noise of the chair in the back, like you could hear it if you listen. But that's because you are so engaged in the moment, and it's always been incredible to me that has never changed for you, has it? You are as excited on a great play today as you were 42 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tom. And, I think it's because I have a great passion for baseball. And of course, those are such meaningful games. What you try to do, and we've had some experience the last few years of having clubs that didn't win as much as you'd hoped, to just try to root for good games and competitive games and still highlight those big moments when they happened. So it's part of just loving the game of baseball and never knowing what you're going to see from one game to the next. I mean, I had no idea going to a ballpark on a cold April night in April 29th of 1986 with most of the media at the Garden watching the Celtics play the Atlanta Hawks that Roger Clemens would strike out 20 that night, the first time in history. So you just never know. Same thing 10 years later when Red Sox are out of the race or the Tigers and he strikes out 20 Detroit Tigers. So you just hope for historic moments or just exciting moments, whether the team is in the pennant race or not. It's much more exhilarating when the team is in the race. There's nothing like it day after day. But still, there are highlights in baseball when your team is not involved in chasing a pennant.
The other great aspect, and we've had the honor to travel along with you and be on the charter with you, and I've had the good fortune of doing some games with you on radio. You love the whole experience. I mean, that book you wrote a few years back, Rights and Sights, talking about favorite spots, favorite cities, favorite restaurants. You know, I would laugh. I remember the last time I did a road game with you, we were in Toronto a few years back, and you turn around and there's six people there. And you go, who are these people? Well, this is, over the years, you've made so many friends in all the spots because you don't, I mean, the dear Jerry Remy, who we lost, he would stay in his hotel room, go to the lobby, go to the ballpark, go back to the lobby, go back to his hotel room. You would get out in the morning and whether you're kayaking in Florida, and we're probably interrupting that now as you talk to us, but biking, going for a bike ride up in Toronto, like you've really sort of gotten to know all these stops along the way, haven't you? You really enjoy the journey.
Yes, well, Tom, I'll tell you, when somebody's paying your expenses to travel around the country, you got to take advantage of it. And I don't sit around and watch TV during the day when I can be out kayaking or biking. I have favorite biking paths in most of the cities and certain places. We love to kayak museums, and as Alex mentioned, we visited some museums with him, Clemente and Jackie Robinson. I always take a group to the Negro Museum in Kansas City. Um, so there's so much to be seen out there, and why not take advantage of it? And of course, you do make friends in other cities during the course of 42 years traveling with the Red Sox. I don't travel as much anymore due to advanced age, but it's still a lot of fun. And I think when you have the opportunity, you take advantage of it. And that's what I tried to do, and that's why the first book was about uh, things to do on the road, more or less a travel log.
Well, great stuff hearing from Joe and just how much the honor meant to him to be there in Cooperstown with the other legends of the game. And he certainly is a fitting addition to the Baseball Hall of Fame as a Ford Seafrick Award winner. So many people have been touched by Joe's career, very involved in the Jimmy Fund and helping with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute so much over the years, a big driving force in the Jimmy Fund Radio Telethon that began only on radio, and then year two came over to NESN and has coexisted ever since. But Joe is one of the biggest forces behind that annual event, and we are thrilled to have his energy and his power and his voice as part of it. And I say so many people have been touched by his career, most of them just fans who got to listen to him spin the tale and spin the web and create the visuals through his voice and relaying the Fenway experience and the baseball experience. I was one of those people growing up in Maine, got to hear him calling games, and Lou Merloni was one of those people as a kid, playing Little League in Framingham, Mass, before going on to play at Providence College, and then having his first game and his first home run in his career called by Joe Castiglione himself. Ultimately, becoming a broadcaster, Lou, of course, was on WEEI's midday co-host, afternoon co-host for many years. Also did a lot of games in the Red Sox booth before becoming part of our NESN team over the last couple of years. So Lou has a very unique perspective on what makes Joe so special. And Lou joined us on a recent podcast to talk about Joe Castiglione. So let's hear that as we continue with this edition of 310 to Left. Listen, I want to start with Joe Castiglione because the announcement came last week. We've all been talking about our memories of Joe. You have a very different perspective. While we've all been around him, you spent a lot of time in the booth with him, doing games with him, and you're from here, so you fully understand, his legacy and what he means to the people of New England. So, when you think of Joe Castiglione, what are your impressions? What are your first thoughts when you hear a guy like that is retiring after 42 years?
It's hard too because it's like to me he's like the voice of the Red Sox and has been, because it's literally on radio and it was pretty cool to meet him for the first time as a player because as you mentioned, like being a kid growing up around here, just listening to the Red Sox on the radio was always Joe Castiglione and when you get called to the big leagues, you're in this excitement phase and everything going on. Then all of a sudden, Joe Castiglione comes walking into the clubhouse, and you hear that voice and you meet him. So, kind of to be a kid listening to him, to have a player have him call, your hits. So I called my first at bat at Fenway Park, and then to later be able to work with him. I did the first game with him back in 2013. So. It was an honor. It's pretty cool because I learned so much from him. I've talked to him. I'm still amazed by him, his memory and how he goes about his business, how much passion he still brings to the game, how much he cares about this team winning and losing. So it's a loss for us. But I'm really happy for Joe and Jan, his wife, to be able to just kind of slow down a little bit now and enjoy themselves. That's a long time. We always think about Castigs walking away from the game, but Jan's given an awful lot too. And kind of giving her husband to us, right? The game of baseball. So I'm really happy for him. Hall of Famer, 100%. And I'm looking forward to that last day at Fenway Park.
How much has he kind of nurtured, like been truly invested in seeing you get better as a broadcaster? And how would you describe the level of care that he has for what is going out in that game broadcast?
Yeah, I think, well, the care I think is obvious because it's just, listen, I get up there, I like to think that I'm well prepared. And then, all of a sudden the game starts and he has some notes on these players that I don't know where the hell he got them from. Right. And it's almost like it's history, right? It's just always like it's in his book. Like he just remembered things from 3 years ago or, his sister was a great volleyball player at UCLA. And it's like, okay, and so like that part of it is still amazing to me. He's helped me from day one. Like the minute I jumped in there and called games, like I said, in 13, I used to do like 25, 30 games a year on radio. And we talk a lot, after games about stuff, about how this went, how that went, how to be better at it. And then this year, when I do games with him, I started doing some play-by-play, and it was freaking awful. You know what I mean? Like it was just like that's not my comfort zone. I don't know what I'm doing. So after games on those road trips, we would spend time, and he would talk to me about this, about that, about what he has seen. Because first off, I've never done it, so I don't mind being criticized. You're a former player. That's that's what we deal with, right? You're not swinging the bat well. We gotta go fix it. So, no, he's been tremendous for me. I've been very lucky to have him around.
Do you remember interactions with him when you were playing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when did that? Was it just afterwards that you really formed the bond with him, or was he a guy you talked to while you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely formed it more. Now, right? Like lately since I've been working with him every day. But I think, hey, you're aware of the broadcasters. You know what I mean? Like you are. You know, it's different now. I felt like I don't know. We would watch tape of us. You know, it was just so different how these guys get information now. You know, because now I'll see a player that will actually he'll go back and look at his game tape or inning or at bat, and they have the NESN feed, so they're listening to the announcers talk about it. I think we had a little bit, but obviously it's so much better. They have so much more of it, so you're more aware of it. So for me as a player, it was just more of an honor just to have him around. You know what I mean? Like same thing with Remy. Like I don't recall really kind of hanging out with them or really diving into the games of listening to them because you're playing, right? But it's just more of seeing them after the game, seeing them on the bus, seeing them on the plane, those sort of things. And for me, an appreciation of him just because, obviously being local and knowing exactly who he is and what he's done.
Well, and that's actually why I asked. You kind of jumped in. My point was, now you're doing a lot of games again, and it's not easy to coexist. You know what I mean? Like you've got to call it like it is, and Joe does. I mean, you can hear it in his voice. The pop up. I mean, there's nothing more depressing than Joe calling a pop up in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs at Fenway, because he bleeds for all of us. But there is a skill to the social interaction with the team. Jerry Remy did it as well as anybody. Right? He does it you don't spend 42 years with an organization without being able to connect with the fans over the airwaves, but be part of that group that is traveling on the team all season long. It's a skill, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not, it should always be in the back of your mind, right? But it really shouldn't kind of affect what you say or how you see things. I guess the good thing about being, like you said, that balance. I do think that he kind of walks that fine line. He is who he is. That's why he's great. So I think players can respect his opinion of it. I always felt like players look in the mirror. Like if he started talking about me struggling at the plate, if I'm struggling at the plate, what's wrong? Like he's right. But there is a balance, and he's walked it perfectly. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, been around. There's so much respect for that guy that I think you can kind of see it with the players.
Well, great perspective from Lou, and great to hear from Joe earlier. And thank you so much for joining. It's going to be an emotional weekend for Joe, no doubt, but really for all of us. The Red Sox will be honoring him before Sunday's game, expecting many of his favorite players to be on hand to be part of that ceremony. And then Joe will go off into an off season as normal. But then we'll get to do things next spring and next summer with his wife, Jen, and his family, his kids, his grandchildren, get to do some of the things he hasn't gotten to do after 42 years of traveling with the Red Sox and doing the games. It has been an honor to be around him at the ballpark, and we will miss him, though, as we said at the top. He will stick around as an ambassador to the team, so we look forward to still seeing him from time to time. And we look forward to our next edition. We will come your way early next week. Alex Spear and I will be back together. We will put together a recap on this season, the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and where this team needs to go from here. Hope you can check out that edition, and thanks for listening to this one. For all of us here at NESN, I'm Tom Caron. Thanks for checking out the 310 to Left podcast. We'll see you again next time.